George and I are just going to have a little chat with Martin so that you can get to know him a bit better. Many of you know him as the General Director of the Baptist Union in Scotland. But before we sort of come and ask you perhaps a bit more about that, Martin, I just wanted to get to know you, the person, the man behind the job, a little bit more. So perhaps you could tell us a bit about your life, where you live, your hobbies, your family, that sort of stuff.
Hey, right. Well, thanks, Andrea. Thanks, George. Yeah, I'm so glad to come along this morning. I'm enjoying this metaphor of the kind of meal and the main course, and am I going to be eaten shortly? Maybe I'm kind of thinking it's a bit like a sharing board. I live in Octorada, just south of Perth, and there's a lovely restaurant here I like to go to called Deli Vino, and they do these fantastic sharing boards for starters, and you get the small one, and it's like about enough for 4 people. It's just terrific, and I think this conference is going to be a bit like a sharing board. Actually, there's going to be quite a lot of stuff in front of us, and we'll probably graze on different bits of it through the day. Yeah. Anyway, a bit about me. So. I'm in Octorada. I'm married to Rebecca, who is a teacher, and we have 3 reasonably grown-up sons. They're all in the 20s now. 2 of them are in London, one's in Coventry. And as you said, I'm the General Director of the Baptist Union of Scotland, which is a network of about 160 churches around the country. My originally, if you're trying to figure out where my accent originates, I'm originally from North Manchester, from Rochdale, and I grew up there. Became a Christian in my teenage years, and went away from there and had a first career in the clothing industry. I worked for a firm called Kangol, who made hats, and I was a production manager with them for a few years, and then I became a Baptist minister. And I was a minister in Aberdeen for a few years, and then down in Worcester in England for nearly 20 years. And then in 2015 came back to Scotland to work with the Baptist Union, supporting the continuing development of ministers. And then in 2019, to my surprise, became General Director.
Yeah. So what would you say has influenced you on your journey of faith?
What's influenced me? Ooh, well,
perhaps along the way.
I suppose there are a number of key people who have been really significant. I became a Christian really through a youth club in a Baptist church in North Manchester, and the youth leader there had a really significant impact on me coming to faith, but on my early discipleship, actually. Someone who modeled the importance of reading the Bible, listening to what God was saying, and doing something about it. Someone who got that kind of enthusiastic faith that was so obviously kind of full of the Holy Spirit. And so he was a huge influence on me. The minister of the church I belong to, whose 80th birthday we celebrated just a couple of weeks ago was a real big influence. I remember actually when I was a teenager, when I was about 16, I thought that God was maybe speaking to me about becoming a minister, and I had this sense. I'd been trained, but really by my youth leader, that I should have a time of prayer and Bible reading every day. And so one day I kind of went to my time of prayer and Bible reading, and this idea came to me: your future is you're going to be a minister in a church. And it seemed like a crazy idea, so I just ignored it and got on with things. The next day when I sat down to pray, the same thing happened. The next day when I sat down to pray, the same thing happened. And this went on for about a fortnight. And then I went to speak to one of the elders of the church that I belonged to, where this youth group was based. And he said, I've been expecting you to come and say that to me for about a fortnight, which was a bit of a surprise and kind of gave me this sense that maybe God was somehow working this. And he was super euphoric about it and kind of said, yeah, clearly God's in this. You should probably go and talk to the minister about it. So I went to speak to Mike, the minister, and he said, well, lad, he said, if God's in this, it'll stay with you. So just sit on it for a while and if God's in it, it'll stay with you. And he kind of calmed down the euphoria and said, just trust God. You're only a young kid. Maybe it's a fad, but if God's in it, it won't go away. It didn't go away, and I knew very clearly that was where the main course of my life was going to be under God's leading. So I guess there are a couple of people who've been really, really significant. Over the years, I've had various mentors. I've kind of gone out and sought mentors and said to people, look, can we meet up once every whatever couple of months or something like that, just to have an honest conversation about my life with God, really. And Rob White was a very big influence on me as my mentor for quite a number of years. Rob had sort of headed up Youth for Christ in the UK for a number of years, and then he was minister at Poynton Baptist Church, and then he kind of did various other things. And I look back to the times of just kind of, sometimes I'd meet him in the motorway services because he lived in Cheshire and I lived in Worcester, and we just actually, I would have some quite powerful encounters with God as he asked me the difficult questions about faith and life that I didn't want to be asked, but I knew that God needed me to face up to, and gave me lots of great encouragement as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a real encouragement for all those who are involved in youth work and the fruit of the influence that people can have. So keep going, any of you out there who are feeling a bit discouraged right now. But yeah, just be encouraged and keep going. And just the importance of a good Christian witness and walking the Christian life with somebody who is going to have permission to ask you those questions, because we all need that, don't we? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
George.
Yeah, Martin, I just wanted to ask, what is a typical day for the General Director of the Baptist Union? What does it look like? Is it a typical day? I don't know. Tell us a little bit about more what you do for the Baptist Union.
Yeah, well, that's that. I'm not sure if there is a typical day, and during the pandemic, for all of us, our kind of typical has become the new typical or the interim typical or something. There are a number of things that I'm quite regularly involved in. One is supporting and leading our staff team. So there are 11 people on the staff team of the Baptist Union, full and part-time members, and I see a big part of my role as the general director as enabling them to do their best ministry, supporting, guiding, encouraging, sometimes organising, but those folk. And I think keeping kind of vision for the team, which I think also my kind of hope is that's consonant with a vision that I'm casting for our churches generally. Many of you probably have heard me talking about transformations, generations, and innovations, which just seem to me the critical thing for our Baptist network at this time, focusing on the transformation of life. The purpose of the church is not simply to keep the show on the road, to keep the charity well run, to keep everyone happy even. It's to see lives transformed by the power of God through the scriptures in the life of the Spirit. Transformations are critical. We need transformation from unconverted to converted, from converted deeper and deeper into discipleship. So transformations are critical. Generations are really important. By that I particularly mean younger generations, because the demography of our churches shows that we are, we lack particularly people in their 20s and early 30s. They're underrepresented, and if we don't invest in such people to be the evangelists and the teachers and the leaders of church going forward, then we're missing out on vital things. And then innovations, I think, are really important. I think the inevitably society is changing so quickly that the church will keep changing and needs to understand new ways of expressing the core things of being a gospel church, but it might look different in shape. It might not be that we sit in straight rows in high buildings, as the kind of main experience of church. So anyway, so you asked me what I do. I mean, I try and keep everyone's eyes focused on the on the vision and on the big picture. I think that's a really important bit of leadership. I try to keep in touch with churches as much as I can do, and most days I'd be having at least 1 or 2 phone calls with ministers or church secretaries, listening, trying to understand, trying to help them sometimes reflect on what's going on. Often I'm at the moment dealing with questions about kind of how churches can act under the coronavirus guidelines. I've become a bit of a geeky expert by accident on that, and so I seem to have become a go-to person for quite a number of people. So I spend a fair bit of time doing that. And there are a number of times when I'm kind of have the privilege of meeting with other leaders from other networks and keeping in touch with what's happening elsewhere. I mean, one of the great things actually during the coronavirus thing is that a new Scottish Church Leaders Forum has emerged. It began at the beginning of the pandemic because I guess a lot of us just felt it would be really helpful to know how other churches are responding to the pandemic. So across the sort of particularly the historic denominations in Scotland, we have a regular gathering now for senior leaders, and there's another gathering we have with government officials. So the Scottish government set up what they call a faith consultation group for the coronavirus outbreak. So all the guidelines that are coming out for churches are kind of processed by this group. Unfortunately, we don't control the guidelines, but we are consulted, and we're able to campaign, if you like, or put pressure on for some things that will be helpful. So there's a whole level of that going on, and then there's obviously all the various teams of the Baptist Union, the Board of Ministry, and the Mission Initiative Group, and the Public Theology Group that I'm trying to support and guide in an ongoing way. So they are some of the things that I'm involved in.
No, that's fantastic. That's a great insight to what you do. That leads us on to my final question. I just want to ask, you mentioned about keeping people focused on the vision. So I want to ask, what does the next 5 years or beyond look like for the Baptist Union of Scotland? Can you whet our appetite for the vision for the future? What are you driving us to?
Well, that's a great question at so many levels. I'm not sure if I'm here quite to drive. It's very important to us that we're a network of independent churches, and but what I do want to do is encourage and influence and spur on in the Lord in any way I can. And as you heard, transformations, generations, and innovations, I think, are going to stay on the agenda, and I'm going to be encouraging everyone to put focus on those. And one thing that is going to change in the coming years is we've just appointed some new staff members. So they will begin at the start of September. Jim Purvis, who's been with us for a long time, is going to demit from his office. He is at retirement age, but he's not going to retire as such, but he's going to leave the Baptist Union staff team, and also Peter Dick, who's been our finance director. So we've got new members of the team, and whereas in the past the team members on the national team of the union have tended to be kind of generalists, we've got some much more focused roles that connect with the transformations, generations, innovations agenda. So for the first time, we're appointing a future church lead who's going to help us think around this innovations question. What future shapes of church are there? What can we learn from each other in that process? How can we share good theology and good practice? We've got a deeper church lead who's focusing on the kind of transformations agenda. How can churches be deeper in discipleship and spirituality? We've got a digital church lead, because digital church is just not going away. And then we've got a leadership development lead, which kind of recognizes that leadership is not only supporting ministers in continuing development, although it certainly is that, but also helping to develop leaders of all kinds in our churches. So I think the future is focused kind of heavily on those goals. I think inevitably there's something that's going to be digital, and I don't think any of us know what that is yet, and I'll say a bit more about that in my talk this afternoon. but clearly the digital isn't going to go away. It's probably not going to be the same as it has been in the pandemic, but that's going to be a strand of what church life is like. So I think that's a really important thing. I mean, I've got a suspicion that that we will be that will celebrate small and large church in new ways. There are a number of people exploring this idea of microchurch, which we were talking about a bit at Canopy, our national gathering last year. And I think we might find a way of embracing small expressions of church, which multiply hopefully quite rapidly, and recognise the benefits of well, I think the Baptist way of being church can actually be done especially well in a small setting. We all kind of know that it's just difficult to discern the mind of Christ in the church meeting when there are 73 people there, and especially, you know, if we've got an agenda of 23 things to get through. Whereas actually a small group of people can, I think, much more readily come together in prayer and discussion where everyone has a voice and discern something about the mind of Jesus for a particular community. So I think that might be one of the directions we go, while also, you know, celebrating and seeing all the benefits of larger churches with multiple ministries in the local community and all those kind of things.
And just finally, as we come to the end of this session, any advice you can give us as lay preachers as to how best we can support the Baptist churches?
Well, you know, I've just got the highest admiration for what you're doing. I love it when I get your mailings and when I get the annual report with all those statistics of the kind of hundreds of churches that have been served every year. And, you know, I particularly want to say, I think you do a fantastic thing. The Lay Preachers Association is a really important part of our, you know, our life as a church together. And I think, I'm not sure if I want to say do something different, but I think that faithfulness and that availability to small and large churches and the willingness of, you know, to cover some of the more remote places sometimes as well, and the faithful service there's been to some of the churches that have been temporarily without a minister or long term without a minister, and you've been able to give, you know, solid persevering support over a long period of time. I just think that's fantastic, and I think, you know, this is a hidden gem of our network of churches, the Lay Preachers Association, and I just want to praise God really for what you're doing and say thanks to Him for this ministry.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, for that encouragement. And so we'll keep on doing what we're doing, but, you know, we're aiming to adapt and thrive, which was my message in the AGM yesterday.